Faye Dunaway was perhaps Hollywood's most hated actress. Sure, she allegedly threw a cup of her own urine at Roman Polanski, slapped co-stars, and got herself fired from Broadway. But was it just diva behavior or something much deeper, like an undiagnosed illness perhaps? I've seen practically all of Faye's films, and I'll admit it, I love her. But I wanted to get to the bottom of it. Were the rumors true? Was she really that bad? In this video, we're breaking down the rise and fall of Faye Dunaway and why Hollywood still hasn't forgiven her. Faye Dunaway was the movie star of the 1970s. She arrived on the scene right at the moment when Hollywood was ripping up its own rulebook. The old school studio era was crumbling. Gone were the clean-cut musicals and Technicolor fantasies. The late 1960s and early 1970s ushered in a new Hollywood, a movement defined by moral ambiguity, messy characters, and stories that weren't afraid to get ugly. And if there was ever an actress built for that kind of raw, unflinching cinema, it was Faye. She wasn't sentimental, she wasn't soft. She had no interest in playing a dainty woman in someone else's fairy tale. Before she was famous, she was a theater-trained actress from Florida, with only a handful of minor film roles. But in 1967, she was cast in Bonnie and Clyde, a last-minute replacement fighting for a breakout part. No one expected much. But when the movie hit theaters, everything changed. Critics were stunned by her performance. Roger Ebert wrote that she had a presence so modern and alive, she made everyone else in the movie feel like a relic. Suddenly, she wasn't just another pretty blonde, she was the face of something entirely new. That same year, she was nominated for her first Academy Award, and it didn't stop there. She followed Bonnie and Clyde with The Thomas Crown Affair, Little Big Man, and Chinatown, films that pushed boundaries, blurred genres, and cemented her status as a serious actress. She wasn't interested in playing it safe. She famously dove deep into her roles, sometimes using semi-method acting, staying in character off-screen, and obsessing over emotional truth. Director Sidney Lumet once said, "Faye didn't approach a character from the outside. She wanted to live in it. She wanted to understand every crack in that person's armor." In 1976, she starred in Network, a brutal satire of television and corporate ambition, and delivered one of the most cutting performances in film history. As Diana Christensen, she played a woman who would sacrifice anything for ratings. It was cold, fearless, and it won her the Oscar. At the height of her fame, Dunaway was everywhere. Red carpets, magazine covers, international award circuits. She worked with the best directors in the world and was making films that challenged audiences. More than that, she redefined what a leading lady could be. She didn't just survive the new Hollywood era, she helped shape it. She proved that an actress could be intellectual, intimidating, and emotionally volatile, and still command the screen. She was a powerhouse. And for a while, it seemed like no one could stop her rise. But behind the magazine covers and the glowing reviews, something else was building. The whispers started quietly at first. Small rumors on set, anonymous quotes in industry columns. Someone said she was too demanding. Others claimed she was impossible. At first, no one wanted to believe it. But soon the stories became harder to ignore, and as it started to unfold, it would dramatically change everything. For a while, Faye Dunaway's intensity was seen as part of her brilliance, but on set, that intensity often crossed a line, and it didn't take long for the stories to start piling up. She once reportedly threw a cup of her own urine at director Roman Polanski. The story goes that while filming Chinatown, he refused to let her take a bathroom break, so she made a statement of her own. Faye denied it, Polanski didn't. And even if it wasn't true, people believed it, because by then her reputation already preceded her. Polanski later called her a gigantic pain in the ass, but admitted she worked harder than most actors he'd ever directed. Arthur Penn, who directed her in Bonnie and Clyde, praised her performance but said working with her was like navigating a minefield. Jack Nicholson once described her as an odd combination of unpredictable and completely professional, adding, "You just never know which one you're going to get." When Bette Davis appeared on The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson in January 1988, Johnny asked her who she hated working with the most. Everyone expected the answer to be Joan Crawford, but without missing a beat, Bette replied, "Faye Dunaway." She looked straight at Johnny and added, "She's totally impossible. I don't think I have the time to get into all the reasons why." That comment wasn't just a throwaway line. It came from the Bette Davis, an actress who had clashed with plenty of people. So for her to name Faye as the worst and to say it on national television was a statement. The two had starred together in The Disappearance of Amy back in 1976, and the stories from that set were legendary. Faye was reportedly late, unprepared, and completely unreliable. During one key scene with nearly 2,000 unpaid extras waiting inside an auditorium, Faye simply didn't show up. Bette, never one to tolerate nonsense, jumped on stage and started performing, just to keep the crowd entertained and the production from collapsing. In her memoir, This and That, Bette Davis wrote, "Miss Dunaway was without a doubt the most impossible co-star I've worked with. I can imagine no circumstances under which I would work again with Miss Dunaway." The feud became more than just gossip. It became a marker of how bad things had gotten. And when one of Hollywood's most respected veterans goes on live television to say you're the worst, it sticks. Faye was still landing roles, still walking red carpets, but her reputation had officially caught up with her, and it was about to get worse. Because next came a role so intense, so personal, that it would change her career forever. When Faye Dunaway accepted the role of Joan Crawford in Mommie Dearest in 1981, it was billed as her comeback, a chance to conquer award seasons again and reclaim her place in Hollywood. But behind the scenes, it unraveled spectacularly. She dove headfirst into the character, some say too deep. Cast member Rutanya Alda later described the atmosphere as tense and frightening, stating, "Faye Dunaway was despised by the crew. Everyone was on pins and needles when she worked, and everyone relaxed when she didn't." Dunaway immersed herself in Crawford's brutal persona, refusing to break from character, even off-screen. Some crew members whispered that her emotional volatility bled into production, getting worse as the shoot went on. There were heated confrontations, bursts of rage, and a mood so heavy it suffocated the set. And the stories, they've only grown with time. Alda claimed that on her very first day, Faye slapped her hard, and not as part of the scene. Dunaway reportedly demanded that anyone not on camera turn their backs during emotionally intense takes. Child actress Mara Obel, who played young Christina Crawford, allegedly screamed, "She stabbed me," during one take of the wire hanger scene because she was so shaken. And perhaps strangest of all, Dunaway later claimed she felt Joan Crawford's ghost on set, watching her from the window ledge with a chilly presence. When the film finally hit theaters, critics did not hold back. The Los Angeles Times chimed in saying, "Mommie Dearest seems a parody flaccid of a bad Crawford film. Cursey at best, simply laborious at worst." But not all reviews were dismissive. Pauline Kael called Dunaway's performance surprising and fierce, noting that her terrifying energy around the wire hanger scene transcends camp. And then, the audience's reaction took another turn. Mommie Dearest flopped as a prestigious drama but soared as a cult spectacle. Midnight showings, cosplay wire hangers, drag nights, it became the gay community's guilty pleasure for that over-the-top theatricality. Even Roger Ebert would later note its cultural shelf life far exceeded the original reviews or what it made at the box office. Faye didn't laugh along. Instead, she felt crushed. In HBO's 2024 documentary Faye, she referred to the film as a mistake, a role she took out of desperation and didn't understand deeply only until it was too late. She refused to promote it, walked off interview sets when it came up, and still refuses to discuss it. Once seen as a prestigious actress, Mommie Dearest cemented Faye's diva reputation and created one of the most damaging blows to her career. What many called a bold theatrical performance, she saw as a moment that made her untouchable in all the wrong ways. If this film wasn't the final nail in the coffin, her later film, The Tempt, would be. After Mommie Dearest, Faye Dunaway faced a changing industry and snapped up what looked like a lifeline with a movie called The Tempt, made in 1993, a thriller set in corporate America that could have been her ticket back to relevance, but instead it became one of her most infamous standoffs. Faye's clash with production began during a reshoot session early in 1993. The studio demanded a new ending after test audiences found the original too violent. But Faye bristled at the rework, claiming it went against her vision. She argued that her character, originally a complex antagonist, was being reduced to a cliché villainous female slasher. Tensions escalated fast. Screenwriter Kevin Falls later called working with her a nightmare. Reports emerged of behind-the-scenes standoffs that almost stalled production overnight. Faye accused of refusing direction, causing frequent delays, and intimidating crew members again. According to some crew reports, Faye would rehearse alone in silence, ignore stage direction entirely. She refused to adjust lighting setups unless they matched what she considered Crawford quality control. One source recalled her walking off set mid-scene after disagreeing with a note from the director, leaving an entire crew waiting for hours. It was the kind of behavior that a decade earlier might have been indulged, but now no one had time for it. Paramount came very close to firing her during these reshoots. Sources say that although they decided to stick with her to avoid media fallout, the damage to her relationship with the crew and the studio was already done. When The Tempt finally hit theaters in February 1993, the result was underwhelming. It bombed, generating just $6.4 million against a $15 million budget. Critics called it tonally innocent, too dark for a thriller, too sanitized for horror. Faye's performance went unnoticed, and her reputation spoke louder than the role ever could. This wasn't a star fading gracefully. It was the spectacle of a professional unraveling, visible, public, and unignorable. For Faye, it felt like a final career crossroads. She could try to pivot, take smaller roles, do stage work, accept supporting parts. Instead, opportunities dried up. What had begun as her comeback had become the moment studios quietly tagged her as high risk, a narrative shift from powerhouse actress to difficult diva, and not in a way that demanded attention, but in a way that guaranteed avoidance. As her star faded, Faye seemed to feel it. In later interviews, she rarely acknowledged The Tempt by name, but she did admit, when speaking to a journalist in the early 2000s, there comes a point when you look around and realize the phone's not ringing anymore. You think, what happened? But the truth is, you know what happened. Her talent was never in question, but at this stage in her career, it wasn't enough. By the late 1990s, the damage was done. Faye Dunaway was no longer a sought-after icon. She was quietly but unmistakably blacklisted. The offers from major studios slowed to a trickle. The directors she once commanded with artistic authority were no longer picking up the phone. Stories of her on-set behavior had become industry folklore. Whispered warnings passed from one casting office to the next. In 2011, she was fired from a stage production of Masterclass for being disruptive and disrespectful, missing rehearsals, and clashing with the creative team. In 2019, it happened again. She was set to star in Tea at 5, a Broadway-bound one-woman play as Katharine Hepburn. According to multiple sources, she slapped a crew member, threw objects at the staff, and created what was described as a hostile and dangerous work environment. The production team let her go before it reached its next run. But at that point, Dunaway had become reclusive, rarely seen in public, almost never interviewed, and mostly silent about the long list of accusations behind her. Even in the 2024 HBO documentary, Faye, which attempted to reclaim some of her legacy, she appeared raw, fragmented, and at times deeply evasive. So what happened? Some say it was ego, as an actress so used to control and defiance that she couldn't adjust to a world that no longer revolved around her. Others say it was a tragic case of mismanagement, a studio darling left unsupported in an industry that devours women the moment they're no longer useful. And then there's a more personal possibility. In 2024, Newsweek reported that Dunaway had been diagnosed with bipolar disorder in the early 2000s. It's a revelation that reframes decades of erratic behavior and emotional volatility, suggesting that what Hollywood labeled as difficult may have in part been untreated illness. But as many who worked with her are quick to note, diagnosis or not, the behavior was real. The damage was done. Still, it's impossible to ignore the double standard. Hollywood is filled with men who've done worse, walked away unscathed. Roman Polanski pled guilty to statutory rape, fled the country, and still receives standing ovations at film festivals. Jack Nicholson has long been surrounded by rumors of aggressive, erratic behavior, including alleged violence on set and disturbing treatment of women, yet both remained industry darlings for decades. Their volatility was labeled eccentric. Their recklessness was branded as brilliance. However, women don't get the same myth. They get punished. Faye Dunaway isn't the only one. Judy Garland was overlooked, drugged, and disregarded when she became too unreliable. Tippi Hedren spoke out about Alfred Hitchcock's abuse, and her career all but ended as a repercussion. And even Shirley MacLaine, despite her talent and longevity, was labeled difficult simply for demanding equal pay. Faye Dunaway wasn't sweet, she wasn't quiet, and she didn't play the game. She was, by all accounts, determined and uncompromising, and that made her dangerous. What's clear is that her legacy remains tangled. She gave some of the most powerful, unforgettable performances of her generation. She brought fire, precision, and danger to every role she touched. She changed the definition of what a leading lady could be. But the same industry that made her iconic, let's just say, made her radioactive. With all the drama surrounding Faye, I'll just have to say it. It's still not going to change that a few of her movies will always be some of my all-time favorites. Hate me for it if you want, but I think that bold, strong-willed personality is exactly what made her so damn good. What do you think? Was Faye Dunaway just a complicated woman or completely misunderstood? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and if you're interested in more of my deep dives, be sure to check out my video on Judy Garland, about how the studio system used her, drugged her, and then in return blamed her for it. It's linked above and below. As always, be sure to like and subscribe for more videos just like this one. Thanks for watching.